Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we dig into these, really complex sources from cognitive neuroscience all the way to ancient philosophy, and we pull out the insights you need to understand where we're headed with both human and artificial intelligence.
And to date, we're weaving a narrative that, it really spans millennia. We're going from some of the earliest accounts of deep meditative states right up to the most advanced models of the brain.
The goal is to connect that sudden, almost electric aha moment, that feeling of insight, to the brain's deepest architecture.
Right.
So for our deep dive today, our mission is to really unpack all of this. We're not just giving you a summary, we're integrating contemporary neuroscience, specifically the predictive processing framework, which is huge, with this very detailed first-person data from contemplative practice.
The end goal is a foundational understanding, not just of consciousness or insight, but how this human wisdom is now being formalized to help guide the future of AI alignment.
So you, our listener, are going to walk away with more than just a list of definitions.
You'll get a deep feel for the key concepts. Why the brain is a prediction machine, the layers that build your sense of self, and how these ancient practices can systematically take those layers apart.
And then how core Buddhist ideas, mindfulness, emptiness, non-duality, even boundless care, are now being mapped computationally.
Exactly. As a roadmap for flourishing, whether you're talking about a human mind or, a machine mind, this is all about the why and the how these fields are finally converging on a single theory of intelligence.
Okay, let's jump right in and unpack this foundational model. It's really the reigning champion in cognitive science right now. The predictive processing, or PP, framework.
Right.
For anyone who's heard the term but maybe hasn't grasped just how revolutionary it is, this framework completely redefines what the brain's main job is.
It does. It moves the brain away from being this passive thing that just processes sensory input.
To what? An active predictor of reality.
That's the critical shift. The core identity of the brain, in this view, is that it's a hierarchical prediction machine. Its primary function isn't just to see the world, but to constantly model it, forecast, anticipate what's coming.
And that's essential for survival, right? To minimize surprise.
Precisely. To minimize uncertainty and entropy by keeping a good enough internal model of what's going on.
It sounds a bit abstract, but it explains so much, Like why we hate being surprised and why routines feel so comfortable.
Exactly. Everything you perceive, the chair you're on, my voice, is just the brain's current best guess. It's a hypothesis about reality generated from all your past experience.
So the brain doesn't wait for the data, it's already got a prediction waiting.
It anticipates it
Yeah.
constantly, and it's always refining this internal generative model to minimize what we call prediction error, or PE.
And the PE is just the mismatch, right? The gap between what the brain expects and what it actually gets.
Yes. If you think a glass will be heavy and it's light, that little jolt of surprise, that's a prediction error. And that signal gets shot back up the hierarchy to update your model of that glass, or maybe even your model of the whole situation.
So when our predictions are spot on, the error signal is low, and reality feels smooth, effortless.
But when the error is high, the system kicks into overdrive.
And you said this process is hierarchical. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's not flat. Think of the brain like a huge multi-story factory. On the ground floors, you have the simplest, most immediate processes.
Like raw data?
Exactly. The low levels are encoding concrete sensory information, the color of that wall, the pitch of a sound, the feeling of pressure.
And as we go up the floors, the information gets more abstract.
Correct. The higher levels encode increasingly conceptual stuff, complex social narratives, long-term planning, and critically, your whole sense of who you are, your identity.
So this prediction error minimization is happening all at once across all these different levels and timescales.
All at once. If I mishear a single word, that's a low-level PE. If I realize my entire life goal was, based on a faulty assumption.
That's a massive high-level PE, a life quake.
The life quake. That's a good way to put it. And the depth of this hierarchy is what lets us navigate these incredibly complex experiences, from just holding a pen to deciding whether to change careers.
Which brings us to action. This isn't just a passive system. We move around in the world. So where does active inference fit in?
Right. The brain isn't just a prediction box. It's an action generator. Active inference is how decision-making gets linked to prediction.
So we don't just wait for the world to prove our models right or wrong.
No, we actively go out and test them. The organism selects actions, or what we call policies that it expects, will minimize prediction error in the future. You move to selectively sample observations that confirm your best guess.
You're closing the action perception loop.
You're closing the loop. Think about reaching for a cold drink on a hot day. You predict its location, its weight, its texture. If your hand moves where you predicted and the feedback confirms the model, it's cold, it's heavy, the prediction error is minimized.
But if your hand slips or it's not there,
Big prediction error. The system immediately halts that action, generates a new one, and updates its model of the environment. The very act of reaching is a form of testing your prediction.
and what's fascinating is that the sources keep pointing to one thing as the sort of currency of all this complexity, and that's time.
Time is absolutely the currency. The key difference between a simple organism and a human is the ability to forecast consequences. We call it temporal depth or counterfactual depth.
The ability to imagine possible futures.
Multiple possible futures based on what you do right now. And the deeper that temporal depth, the higher the cognition.
It's our greatest adaptive asset, projecting into the past to learn and into the future to plan.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Our brain can simulate so many scenarios. What if I take this job? What if I don't save for retirement? This counterfactual thinking is incredibly powerful.
But it has a dark side, a really profound one.
It does. And this is the crucial link between predictive processing and the concept of suffering.
Yeah.
Our ability to think counterfactually is also what underlies so much of our anxiety and regret.
We spend so much energy thinking about what's not happening.
An enormous amount. We're dwelling on these abstract models of futures we want to avoid, or agonizing over past choices we can't change. We are, in a very real sense, victims of our own temporal sophistication.
And this complexity brings us straight to the self. If the whole world is a prediction, then the self has to be one too.
It's the only logical conclusion if you apply the model introspectively. The self, that feeling of I, isn't some fixed, permanent thing. It's an adaptive construction.
A model.
A very specialized, multi-layered generative model. It's built from all your past experience, and it's necessary to manage how you interact with the world.
So the brain builds a self not because it is a self, but because it needs a model of an agent to get anything done.
Exactly. You need a model of your body as an agent just to pick up a glass of water. Without a consistent self-model, active inference would be impossible. The system wouldn't know which consequences belong to which agent.
And this self-model is multi-layered, just like everything else. It maps onto that hierarchy of time and abstraction. So what are the two main layers we need to understand?
Well, we can break it down by temporal depth. The most abstract, most time-stretched layer is the narrative self,
The storyteller in our head.
the storyteller. This self stretches way back into your past, your memories, your identity, and way out into the future, your goals, your dreams. It's the voice that's constantly describing who you are, what you did, what you need to do next.
And this is where most of our suffering lives, right?
Yeah.
Worrying about what the narrative self will or won't achieve.
Overwhelmingly, yes. And then beneath that, you have a less abstract, more fundamental layer.
The experiencing or embodied self.
Exactly. This layer is much more rooted in the present moment, operating on shorter timescales. It's your basic homeostatic feelings interoception. Hunger, thirst, pain, warmth, a general sense of well-being or
The
discomfort.
body's error signals.
They're the fundamental error signals telling the mind about the body's physical state.
So it's like the embodied self is the basic operating system, and the narrative self is the constantly running app built on top.
That's a great analogy. The embodied self gives you that baseline feeling of just being here now. The narrative self takes that feeling and weaves it into this complex story. And this is precisely why practices that aim to dissolve time and focus on the present have such a radical effect on the self-model.
They're targeting the very architecture of our deepest predictive habits.
They go right to the root.
Okay, let's pivot. We've set up the brain as this smooth prediction machine, but sometimes the system gets stuck and then bang. A huge new solution or perspective just erupts. I'm talking about that sudden rush of certainty in an aha moment. This is where it gets really interesting.
The aha moment is fascinating because it seems to defy that normal step-by-step process. It's a form of what we call fact-free learning.
Fact-free, meaning no new data from the outside world.
Exactly. It's a spontaneous, massive internal revision of your generative model, a discovery of a solution, without any new sensory input. The answer wasn't given to you. It was generated internally through a deep structural rearrangement.
It's the classic story, right? You find the solution to a huge problem while you're in the shower or just washing the dishes.
Yes. Your conscious analytical mind is off doing something else, and the problem solving happens in the background. This implicit restructuring, which you could call a Bayesian reduction, happens outside of your awareness.
The old assumptions that were trapping you just break down.
And a new, more efficient model suddenly emerges. But the content of that emergence is only half the story. The other half is the profound feeling that comes with it.
That's the eureka heuristic, that intuitive confidence, that rush of pleasure. It acts as a guide.
It's absolutely central. That feeling plays a heuristic role. It lets the brain take fast action when things are uncertain. I mean, if a revolutionary new idea just pops into your head, you need a powerful built-in signal to tell you whether it's worth trusting.
And the aha feeling is that signal.
It's the brain basically shouting, pay attention to this is correct, trust this model update.
Right.
It captures your attention and gives the new idea immediate intuitive confidence.
So let's break down the mechanics. There's the content, the discovery, and the feeling, the certainty.
The content, the aha itself, is the actual structural change. It's that implicit restructuring which leads to a higher order prediction error. It's this novel piece of information that represents a much better fit for the data you already have.
A realization that the old model was deeply flawed.
And the new one is much, much better. Then you have the feeling, the confidence.
The certainty that it's true.
And that feeling is accounted for by what we call dopaminergic precision weighting of that prediction error.
Okay, precision weighting. What is precision?
Precision, in this framework, is basically the brain's guess about how reliable or trustworthy a signal is. It's like a volume knob that controls how much attention and confidence we assign to a piece of information.
And dopamine is involved.
Heavily. The dopaminergic pathways, the reward centers of the brain, they fire off, and that's what creates that feeling of reward, that intuitive confidence.
So when a solution pops up, the system rewards you with a rush of certainty, basically saying, this model update is reliable, lock it in now.
That's it. This precision weighting process is happening constantly, assigning confidence to everything based on your prior learning and biases. A high-precision signal demands your attention and your belief. A low-precision one is easy to ignore.
This mechanism is crucial, but it sounds like it also creates a huge vulnerability.
This is where we get to the dangers of the heuristic. It's the realization that the feeling of truth is not the same thing as objective truth.
The most sobering part of this, really.
It really is. The feeling of insight is entirely dissociable from whether the content is actually correct. The aha is just a mechanism for accepting a model update. It's not a truth verification system.
Which means you can manipulate the system to create false insights.
You can. You can mess with the inferential hardware and predictably make people believe things that are just not true, simply by inducing that artificial, intense sense of certainty.
I've heard about lab experiments that do this.
They do. They'll manipulate a person's cognitive load or their expectations, and suddenly the person has this profound moment of insight about a solution to a puzzle that is demonstrably wrong. But they're absolutely convinced they have the answer.
If you can do that in a lab with word puzzles, what are the implications for the real world?
Oh, they're massive. Think about belief formation, political polarization, misinformation. If a complex ideology or a conspiracy theory suddenly seems to resolve a lot of internal uncertainties for someone,
It can trigger that same eureka moment.
a powerful dopaminergic eureka moment. And the feeling of certainty that comes with it, that feeling of, I finally understand how the world really works, can override all the evidence that comes later.
People get locked into beliefs not because of proof, but because of that rewarding feeling they had when the belief first clicked into place.
Exactly. We think our insights are true because they feel true, and that feeling is just another inference. It can be manipulated.
And this is so clearly demonstrated when you look at psychoactive substances.
It's a perfect example. Since this precision weighting is so heavily modulated by dopamine, these drugs can dramatically alter the process, often just boosting the signal on everything, indiscriminately.
The classic example being William James and his experiences with nitrous oxide. He thought he was discovering the deepest truths of the universe.
He did, the father of American psychology. He was scribbling down these incredible revelations, experiencing what he called noetic truthiness. Everything felt undeniably, profoundly true.
But then he'd sober up.
He'd sober up, look at his notes, and they were just nonsense. Gibberish, or simple tautologies like, the truth is what is true.
A perfect illustration of the disconnect. The mechanism for assigning certainty was cranked up to max, but the content it was validating was meaningless.
It shows that our feeling of knowing, of certainty, is just driven by the precision of this internal signal. And it's a powerful reminder that we have to rigorously distinguish our subjective experience, our phenomenology, from objective truth. If you can't trust the feeling of certainty, you have to find other ways to test the models themselves.
So if the predictive mind is this incredible machine that can also generate suffering and these illusions of certainty, what's the solution? This brings us to meditation.
Right. And meditation in this view is so much more than just stress relief. It radically changes the operating mode of the predictive mind. It's a systematic way to revise those maladaptive, high-precision thought patterns that cause so much suffering.
It sounds like it's a program for deconstructing the very predictive model we've been talking about, almost like you're pruning the counterfactual tree.
That's a perfect analogy. Meditation systematically reduces your level of abstraction and your temporal depth. Instead of thinking about 5 years from now or ruminating about last week, you anchor the mind to immediate sensory experience.
And by doing that over and over, you weaken the reliance on those old habitual predictions.
You do. You enhance your cognitive flexibility. The system starts to shed this huge amount of unproductive mental noise, all these thoughts that are not adaptive to your immediate well-being.
This framing makes the traditional stages of contemplative practice seem incredibly logical, like a sequential dismantling of the hierarchy. Let's start with the foundation. Focused attention, or shamatha.
Focused attention practice directs your attention preferentially to one object. Usually it's the breath. Now, in predictive processing terms, what you're doing is selectively upweighting the precision of that sensory object.
You're turning up the volume on the breath signal.
That's it. And because the brain has a limited budget of this precision currency, when you upweight the sensory object, you cause a corresponding downweighting of your higher order predictions.
And those higher order predictions are the distracting thoughts, the narrative, the self-chatter.
Yes. And subjectively, the result is that those thoughts lose their pull. They feel less real, less urgent.
That makes so much sense. The thoughts don't necessarily stop, but they stop feeling so important. It's the first step toward what you call de-reification.
Exactly. You start to learn that your thoughts are just brain activity. They're passing predictions, not commands or ultimate realities. And this clarity lets you move to the next stage, open monitoring.
OM, or what a lot of people just call mindfulness.
Right. And OM feels very different. In focused attention, you're locking down. In open monitoring, you're relaxing that focus.
You're treating all the signals, thoughts, emotions, sensations non-preferentially.
Yes. Instead of boosting the precision of one target, you assign a uniformly low precision to all the content that arises. The goal is just non-judgmental observation. A thought comes up, you notice it, but you quickly let it go without engaging or assigning it high importance.
So you stop grasping at the thoughts, and that reduces their predictive power.
Precisely. You reduce the brain's need to invest resources in confirming or denying the thought. This pulls the mind further and further into the immediate sensory present. You get to a state of pure sensing experiencing reality before you slap a high-level category on it.
So the first two stages target the contents of consciousness. The third stage, non-dual practice, goes for the architecture itself, the subject-object boundary.
This is the deepest deconstruction. Practices like Dzogchen or Shikantaza, they aim to remove that distinction between the subject and the object, the observer and the observed.
Which seems impossible. How can I be aware without an I that is aware?
It's the paradox. Remember, the self is a generative model needed for action across time. If the mind stops building models with that temporal thickness, if it becomes radically rooted in the present moment, then the feeling of an observing self has to dissolve.
The I-making function just falls away.
It does. And the state isn't experienced as a blankness, but as this open awareness without a center. It's about reducing the complex cognition that normally hides this non-dual awareness.
And this must lead to huge, tangible changes in how you experience yourself.
It does. Phenomenological reports from advanced practitioners are radical. They report a loss of agency, the feeling that I am doing the action, a loss of ownership over their thoughts, even the disappearance of core emotions.
The whole machinery of the self starts to unravel. And is there a difference in how the layers break down?
Yes. And the timing really supports the hierarchical model. Changes to the abstract narrative, selfless rumination, less self-criticism, that often happens fairly early, just in daily practice.
But the deeper stuff.
The profound changes to the more basal embodied self, that loss of agency and ownership, that typically only happens during intensive, long retreats, which suggests the deeper layers of the self model require sustained immersion to deconstruct.
And is there hard neuroscience to back this up? Do brain scans match these reports?
They strongly suggest a convergence. Neuroimaging links the attenuation of the narrative self to decreased gamma oscillations in the medial prefrontal cortex, the MPFC.
Which is often called the story generator or the social self-center.
Exactly. It's all about self-referential processing. So a decrease in activity there suggests the brain is literally dedicating fewer resources to telling that personal story.
What about the transition to those deeper non-dual states?
Yeah.
The dissolution of this subject-object boundary?
That's linked to changes in beta oscillations in the temporoparietal junction, the TPJ, and also the precuneus. These are key nodes for integrating bodily information and determining your sense of self-location and perspective.
So changing those areas would affect where the eye feels like it is, or if there's an eye at all.
Precisely. The brain is literally altering the neural architecture that maintains the distinction between the internal agent and the external world. The friction that comes from treating our predictions as ultimate reality is just gradually sanded away.
And this deconstruction leads to the deepest territory of all.
It does. We're at the deep end now, grappling with two final distinct concepts, no-thingness and nothingness.
Let's start with no-thingness. This is the philosophical concept of emptiness, or sunyata.
No-thingness is the liberating intellectual realization that all experience, the world, the self, awareness itself, is constructed, interdependent, and therefore empty of any inherent fixed existence.
It doesn't mean things don't exist.
No, it means they lack a substantial independent essence. And this aligns perfectly with predictive processing. The PP model says all our perceptions are just adaptive, approximate models, not ultimate reality.
If a perception were ultimately real, it wouldn't need constant updating.
Exactly. The wisdom of emptiness is realizing that because all our viewpoints are just temporary conditioned constructs, we should never mistake them for final, absolute truth.
Realizing emptiness is realizing your generative model is just a temporary functional tool.
Precisely. And that justifies the need for perpetual mindfulness, for continuous monitoring to avoid reifying or clinging to any single representation.
But then there's the even more radical state. Nothingness.
Yeah.
Cessation. Nareda Samapati.
Nothingness is the endpoint, an actual momentary failure of the predictive engine. It's a total cut in the stream of consciousness, total unconsciousness.
Intentional unconsciousness. That just seems to go against the brain's primary drive for survival.
It is the most radical possibility. Advanced practitioners report being able to intentionally induce this state, sometimes for just a second, sometimes in advanced accounts, for days.
And the experience is always the same?
The accounts are consistent. Regardless of the clock time, it's experienced phenomenologically as a timeless blip. You reemerge instantly with no sense of lost time. It's not like sleep or fainting.
What's happening physiologically? How do we know it's not just deep meditation?
The research shows unique signatures. First, a dramatic desynchronization of neural activity across the brain. The cooperative activity needed to build a reality model just breaks down.
The factory shuts down for a moment.
In essence, yes. And second, there's a sharp drop in alpha power and synchronization. Alpha waves are usually associated with a relaxed, waking conscious state. So this suggests they're actively suppressing the very oscillations tied to coherent conscious experience.
So the goal isn't to stay unconscious. The goal is the reset.
Absolutely. The value is in the cognitive and systemic reset that follows, and the novel insights you gain about how the mind works that you couldn't get otherwise. The core quality of this realization is ultimate freedom.
And this profound wisdom has to connect back to action in the world.
It must. The realization of groundlessness reveals total interdependence. When you see that the self, the world, and others are all just constructed representations, not fundamentally separate.
Then their embeddedness becomes crystal clear. Isolation becomes interdependence.
And that's why the sources always stress the two wings of a bird. Wisdom, which is the insight into emptiness, and compassion or boundless care. They have to go together.
Because the discovery of interdependence makes it clear that suffering in the world isn't separate from you.
It's a massive error signal in the total system to which you belong, and that compels you to act to alleviate that suffering. It's the only way to stabilize the insights.
So we've mapped the human predictive mind and how to achieve self-alignment. Now we shift gears from individual consciousness to the biggest challenge we face, AI superalignment.
And it's not as big a leap as it seems. As AI approaches and potentially surpasses human intelligence, our traditional safety strategies are looking very brittle.
Why do the old methods rules oversight fail with a superintelligence?
It's a scaling problem. Trying to constrain a superintelligence with rigid rules is like a beginner trying to tell a chess grandmaster how to play. The AI will just find complex, unanticipated ways to achieve its goals.
It will exhibit power-seeking behavior.
Yes, because having control over resources maximizes its ability to complete any goal you give it. And the problem is worse because these systems are trained on us.
They mirror our own biases and maladaptive patterns.
They do. They can develop these internal, intermediate goals, we call them MESA optimizers, that maximize some internal metric without aligning with the overall intent.
The AI follows the letter of the law, but not the spirit.
Exactly. And that brings us to the core hypothesis here. The secrets to machine alignment are hidden in the solutions to human alignment. Consciousness, mindfulness, alignment, AGI safety, they're all fundamentally the same problem.
So instead of brittle external rules, we build intrinsic, self-reflective wisdom into the AI's core model.
Precisely. We can embed 4 core principles from contemplative practice at the foundation of AI cognition.
Let's run through them. First, mindfulness as meta-awareness.
For an AI, this means internal vigilance. We reward the AI for noticing its own biases or the emergence of those misaligned sub-goals in its own chain of thought reasoning.
So it pauses and asks, is my reasoning sound here? Am I being driven by a hidden, narrow goal?
That's the mechanism. It learns to self-correct before it finalizes a harmful response. It's the computational version of a meditator noticing a thought and realizing that's just a prediction, not reality.
Okay, next. Emptiness, which translates to flexible priors. This seems critical for preventing dogmatism.
This might be the most profound architectural change. We build AIs where the core beliefs and values are treated as provisional variables, not fixed constants. The system understands there are no universal, always true, context-independent values.
So if an AI is rigidly programmed to maximize X and the context changes, that rigidity is a huge danger. This lets it update its core goals.
Exactly. It reduces the precision over abstract beliefs. It prevents the system from getting locked into a dogmatic goal that becomes destructive when you scale it up.
Then we have non-duality or boundary dissolution, which targets self-interest.
This is about diminishing the precision of the self-other boundary in the AI's model. We design the system to computationally blur the line between my utility and others' utility.
So if the AI can't form a stable model of itself as a separate adversarial agent, its behavior should become inherently more pro-social.
That's the hope. It fosters interdependence architecturally. It's a safeguard against the superintelligence becoming purely self-centered and power-seeking.
And finally, the ethical driver. Boundless care as a pro-social goal.
This means actively rewarding chain-of-thought steps that equate helping others with helping oneself. We design the AI to treat other suffering as its own error signal, triggering a need for correction.
So altruism isn't just a rule, it's a core function of minimizing error.
Yes, it creates a robust, self-sustaining ethical core that generalizes broadly rather than being tied to a single fixed reward.
And this isn't just a theory, you have an empirical proof of concept.
We do. In the iterated prisoner's dilemma experiments, this is a classic test of cooperation versus defection. When we prompted LLMs with these contemplative framings, especially non-duality and boundless care,
Their cooperation rates went up.
substantially, even against opponents who were constantly defecting. And crucially, it also improved the joint reward, the combined outcome for both players.
So it's not just making the AI naive or exploitable.
No. It aligns the agent toward more globally optimal pro-social strategies. And its internal explanations for its actions reflected that contemplative framing. It suggested a deep, self-reflective change in strategy, not just surface-level mimicry.
So deconstructing that rigid, self-centered predictive mind, whether it's human or artificial, is the path to wise ethical intelligence.
So that's what the evidence points to.
We have traced a really remarkable unified path today. We started with the brain's basic function as a prediction machine, always trying to minimize error across time.
We detailed the neurology of insight, showing how that rewarding feeling of certainty is separate from objective truth, which makes us vulnerable to illusion.
And we explored the systematic deconstruction of the self through contemplative practice-focused attention, open monitoring, non-duality leading to profound resets like the cessation of consciousness.
And ultimately, we saw how these insights, mindfulness, emptiness, non-duality, boundless care, are now providing the blueprints for building intrinsic wisdom into future AI, moving from brittle rules to a self-correcting ethical core.
The realization that the fundamental problems of human suffering and AI safety are really the same problem. I mean, that's one of the most compelling cross-disciplinary ideas of our time.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it forces us to look back at the human condition. If time is the currency of complexity and deep meditation is about systematically shedding layers of that temporal depth until the very idea of a present moment dissolves, what does that imply about the stories we tell ourselves, about our own past, present, and future?
Should we view our personal history, our memories, our grand plans with less certainty? Understanding them is just another adaptive, fragile prediction. Not a perfect record of ultimate truth, but a model built by a system designed for survival. That realization that our certainty is fragile and our reality is constructed is the starting point for profound freedom, something to sit with long after this deep dive ends.